Greetings, Montana, and hello, world. Once again, Chris Hislop from the Montana World Affairs Council. Welcome to another session in our International Careers Week, where we are bringing you a veritable smorgasbord of international expertise. We just spoke with Carol Spahn, the director of the U.S. Peace Corps. We've been talking to people from the United Nations, from the private sector, from the military, you name it. We're trying to cover it this week. Why? Because in our work around Montana, when we bring expert speakers like ambassadors, diplomats, and other international experts to classrooms and communities, we often get the question, how did you get the job that you have, and how can I do that job? So there's a lot of interest here in Montana on international careers. So why not bring together this extraordinary group of people who can help us understand a little bit better about the opportunities that are available in international work. Now, our guests have been from Montana, they've been from the United States, and they've been from all around the world. So it doesn't really matter where you are, you can engage in an international career from just about anywhere. So let me begin by thanking our very generous sponsors at the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, First Interstate Bank, Trail West Bank, QFI, High Stakes Foundation, and Longview Foundation. They help us bring this and so many more programs to you. All right, now let me introduce our guests today. Sarah Howerton serves as the Development Manager at IRC in Missoula, where she works to support and strengthen refugee resettlement programs by overseeing the organization's intern and volunteer programs, in-kind donations, fundraising, and community outreach efforts. She has a BA in anthropology and an MPA from the University of Colorado, Denver, where she studied nonprofit program management and spent a winter term in Uganda and Rwanda studying international development. She's joined by her colleague, Eamon Fahey, who directs the Missoula office of the International Rescue Committee, the only resettlement agency operating in Montana. Since his arrival in Missoula in 2003, Eamon has worked for and led nonprofit organizations and in the public sector. He has a BA in Russian and Eastern European Studies from Middlebury College and a JD from Ohio State, where he served on the editorial board of the ABA Ohio State Journal on dispute resolutions and was a State Department Foreign Language and Areas Studies Fellow. Sarah and Eamon, welcome to the program. How are you?
Doing well. Excited to be here. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, we're extremely happy to have you. And again, as I mentioned, the guests this week have been from all over the world. And I'll just remind participants that if you've missed any of these extraordinary programs, they're on our Facebook and our YouTube channel. You can go back and have a look. But one thing that I've really enjoyed is talking to colleagues who are here in Montana, because it may not immediately strike people that you can enjoy an international career, but be here in Montana, engaging in the world in many different and interesting ways. So we would be very interested to hear your perspectives on that. I'm going to ask Sarah to kick us off a little bit, Sarah, about yourself, your work, your organization, then going over to Eamon. And if both of you could give our viewers some advice about what it means to work for the IRC and opportunities therein for those people who want an international career. Sarah, over to you.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for having me and for the wonderful introduction. So I have this incredible job as the development manager with the IRC in Missoula. For those of you who don't know, the IRC, or the International Rescue Committee, is Montana's only refugee resettlement agency, which is pretty cool that it's right here in Missoula. So in a nutshell, I mean, I could speak for a while about everything that we do, but in a nutshell, when newly arriving refugee families come to Missoula, the IRC is there to greet them, pick them up from the airport, help them find housing, help them find employment, get them connected to, physical health, mental health services, immigration support, and a myriad of other things that we do to support these people in the earlier days of their arrival. And we can serve folks for up to 5 years once they arrive. And the work that we do here in Montana and in the US and on a global scale is really important. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. We are seeing unprecedented numbers globally of displaced persons. And the IRC is one of those organizations that works abroad in response to disasters as they unfold. So it's really awesome to be part of an amazing organization like this. But if I'm being honest, in terms of how I came to be in this career path, it took me a little while to figure out what the heck I wanted to do. Basically, when I was 19 years old, I traveled abroad on my own for the first time. And at that point, I was really, really motivated to have a career with an international focus. But again, I had no idea how to achieve that. So hopefully, if there are students here who are sort of in the same boat, this is helpful. No idea what I wanted to do, what kind of professions existed, what kind of profession I wanted to pursue. So I decided to major in anthropology, just with a sort of focus on, different cultures around the world. And that was a helpful stepping stone. But what really, really helped me is when IRC opened, we opened in 2016, and I actually started volunteering with the IRC in Missoula in 2017. And that was a really, really powerful experience. And something clicked. And I had sort of one of those aha moments where I said, I think this is what I want to do with my life. I think I want to get involved and do some good in this world and help with this displaced persons crisis. So that really sort of set me on the trajectory that landed me where I am today. And I did some research in different NGOs and resettlement agencies and the kinds of degrees and expertise that they were looking for in their job opportunities. And that led me to pursue my Master's of Public Administration and focus on, nonprofit management and get some international experience. And now I am here. So that's kind of how that worked out. So my title, development manager, I get a lot of questions on what exactly that means. Development can have that word can have different meanings in different professional contexts. But here in the US programs of the IRC, it really pertains to resource development. So that covers fundraising efforts, finding and applying for funding opportunities, coordinating in-kind donations when people are donating tangible items. That's overseeing the volunteer and intern programs and community outreach and communications. So it's a lot of different hats to wear in any single day. On any given day, I could be working on a number of those things, maybe having a meeting with a potential donor in the morning and then driving around collecting items that people are donating. So no 2 days look alike, and I find that very enjoyable. And so I think this position, to me, it really matters within the realm of what we do in terms of serving newly arriving refugee families and helping them to rebuild their lives, because I get to sort of behind the scenes support all of the various programs that we have here by assigning volunteers to help maybe the caseworkers or the health team, by getting in-kind donations to help satisfy the needs of newly arriving families for materials, pots and pans and things like that. And then, being able to secure funding is really rewarding when that funding is in turn used to directly support our programs and increase our capacity to reach people and making sure that we're doing a really good job. So I just sort of view myself as like a behind the scenes person who is really strengthening our programs as best I can. Upsides and downsides to the job. I think there's definitely more upsides to speak to. I think one of the main ones is that this job directly aligns with my passions and my motivations to do good in this world and to have an international focus. That kind of cliche saying, when you do something you'll love, you'll never work a day in your life. That's not totally true, but it's mostly true. So even when days are long and I'm working really hard and I'm really tired, there's motivation to keep going. Downsides, I mean, this work is incredibly unpredictable. So I guess depending on who you are, that could be an upside or a downside. But that sort of brings me to, common characteristics of somebody who might be in my position. I think you need to be really flexible, really adaptable, able to pivot on a moment's notice. Plans change frequently. I know I've got some interns that I'm working with right now who are helping me and will, the day before say, okay, this is the plan for the day. We'll get to work. Plans shot, we got to retool. So someone who's organized and flexible would do really, really well in this job. And for anybody who is interested in pursuing this kind of job, again, what really, really helped me sort of hone into what kind of educational programs to enroll myself in, what kind of expertise to get via volunteering and internships, is to research the international organizations. And IRC, again, it's huge. We operate in over 40 countries. So look at the job openings, see what kind of background, educational backgrounds and experience they're looking for, and get as much as you can of that through internships, through volunteering. It really, really helps set you up for an awesome experience. So I think that's all I've got.
Thanks a lot for that, Sarah. I mean, I've got a lot of questions on that, but we're going to go to Eamon. Before we do, I'll just remind our participants, please, if you have questions to Eamon or Sarah, chat them in to me or to everybody. I'll curate those and then pass them on during the Q&A session. So please feel free to chat in your questions. Eamon, over to you.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Sarah. How a little bit about sort of how I got to this place. And I think when I was sitting in some of the viewer seats when I was in high school, I was very fortunate. My parents met and married in the Peace Corps, and so I just always had sort of we were hosting constantly people from all over the world, and that was just part of who I was when I was growing up. And I wanted to kind of continue that work. I also was very fortunate when I was a junior in high school. I got to participate in an exchange program, what was then the Soviet Union. And so my family hosted somebody from the Soviet Union. They were actually from Armenia. And then I spent a month there again as a junior in high school, and that was just an amazing experience. And while I was there, I literally was viewing history be made. I think 2 days after I arrived, the Berlin Wall fell. So just an amazing time. I then went on to study Russian and knew that that's what I wanted to do to continue to build on sort of that experience I'd had in high school. And I'd also studied some Russian in high school, which I was very fortunate to do as well. And again, was able to get a front seat view to history. And the way I was admitted into college, I began in February rather than September. So I had some time, sort of like a gap year before gap years existed. And I'm dating myself for sure. But so what I did then is participated in another foreign travel experience, again, going to Russia. And I arrived there a couple of weeks after the putsch or a coup, and witnessed sort of the Soviet Union fall apart. So I was arrived to a city called Leningrad at the time. It's now known as St. Petersburg, and that all changed when I was there. So just had some remarkable sort of and very fortunate to have those experiences. I then traveled a couple of other times while I was in college to Russia, and actually Ukraine as well. So I knew I wanted to continue doing something again internationally. And my spouse, who, and this is a shameless plug for the outstanding programs at the University of Montana, teaches Russian. She's a professor of Russian language, culture, literature, et cetera, at UM. And that's what brought me to Montana. Again, after college, I went to law school to kind of continue sort of in some ways continue a liberal arts education, but also again to increase my career opportunities in this area. And in law school, I was fortunate to receive a U.S. State Department Foreign Language and Area Studies fellowship, which paid for a year of my law school, gave me a nice stipend, and the ability to spend a year studying Polish, which was awesome. Really appreciate that. Anyhow, what brought me out to Montana, and I've been here for nearly 20 years, was my wife getting a position at the University of Montana. And so coming out here, you know, what am I going to do with those ambitions to continue to work in international that sphere, and I was surprised to find so many great opportunities, including again things through the University of Montana. Of course, Chris, your organization puts on all kinds of wonderful programming. So for many years, stayed engaged in that way. And in the meantime, I worked, managed nonprofits, and spent a little bit of time. I worked for the University of Montana's legal counsel's office for just a short period of time. But anyhow, was so excited to find the IRC working here. I feel so fortunate to have landed in this place, working for this organization. This has been certainly the most fulfilling, greatest work I've done. As Sarah mentioned, the IRC, what we do in our office in Missoula, we resettle displaced people. Since 2016, when we actually reopened our doors, we were actually operating in Missoula in the 1980s as well. We've resettled, helped to resettle more than 600 people and welcome them to our community. And those include people from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, from Eritrea, from Syria. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Afghanistan, Iraq. We've recently had families, a family from Yemen, a Burmese family. Anyhow, it's just amazingly powerful work. And one of the things that I really love about it, in addition to the work that we do, the people that we serve and how fulfilling that is. Another thing that I just love about this work is that I'm doing it with people who have the same passion. Working with people like Sarah is just so fulfilling, and keeps me coming back to work every day. And that's something that I think you'll find is not uncommon in working for NGOs. So a little bit more now about the IRC. So we've talked a little bit, and Sarah's talked about sort of what we do again, in the United States, in Missoula, in our office. And again, that's resettlement. So we're resettling, again, people, displaced people. So Sarah also alluded to this. We are now, the world is facing, the greatest number of displaced people in history. The other time of great displacement was after the Second World War, but we've now gone way beyond that. The sort of the most recent numbers are, I think, 103 million people displaced. And that number is certainly increased. I think that was from this past summer. Recently, very recently, we've had another event, this time an environmental, that's created literally millions of environmental refugees. And I'm referring, of course, to the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. And so what the IRC does, and a fun fact about sort of our beginnings, sorry about that. We were started sort of at the suggestion of Albert Einstein in the 1930s to help folks in Germany who were being displaced by the political environment there, by Hitler, the Nazis. And that's still at the core of the work we do today. So again, we're responding to humanitarian crises throughout the world. Some examples of the work we do. We very recently, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we opened up offices in Poland and Moldova to respond to that crisis. We've been in Syria for, I believe, since 2012. That's sort of when, there were a couple of things going on then there. There was a drought, a long-term drought, and then civil war broke out. So we go to these places, again, where you have these events that cause great displacement of people. Sometimes it's internal displacement where people move to another place in their country. Sometimes they might have to flee their country. Again, there are opportunities all over the world to work for this organization. Again, here in the United States and in Montana. And again, I would just tout how fulfilling this work is. And there's not necessarily, yes, there are certain things you can do for your education, but just being curious, wanting to know about other cultures, other things is going to take you a long way. Studying other languages, those type of things, prepare you to be able to do this work. Sarah mentioned a couple of other things that really help, that aren't necessarily classes to take or degrees to pursue. But some other things, this is an area of constant change. And so being adaptable, being flexible, those are things that are going to take you a long way and enable you to be successful in doing this work. I'm very excited for you all to, it's fun to reflect on when I was your age, and I feel very fortunate to be again doing the work that I think back then I was daydreaming about being able to do here in Montana. So thank you.
Sarah and Eamon, thanks a lot for that overview. Great complimentary presentations there. I'll just remind our guests who are out there, feel free to chat in questions to Sarah or Eamon about their work, their organization, International Careers. In the meantime, I'm going to use my moderator's privilege here and ask you a few questions. Sarah, maybe first to you. You talked a little bit about your path and coming to the IRC. That included undergraduate work and then an MPA, and then you mentioned some volunteering work. Maybe could you parse that just a little bit? What of those things are required? What are good to do? When somebody is thinking about this, Eamon mentioned some of the academic background, but we always want to know, are some of these things you absolutely must do, or they're useful, or what have you? So Sarah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think, as there are, positions with IRC all across the globe, I think it can vary certainly. But I think, I mean, a wide variety of academic programs are appropriate, as Eamon mentioned. That could be language studies, it could be sort of my path anthropology, social work, public health, because of the programs we do are so varied between casework and health and immigration and employment. I think a wide variety of academic backgrounds are appropriate. I think most positions and most hiring managers are looking for somebody with at least a BA. So that's a good thing for starters. And again, I think because IRC is so vast and there are so many different departments, that there is a niche for everyone's particular, interests and strengths. So yeah, that's what I would say. And in terms of the volunteer work that I did, and it's not required, but I think too, if folks have an idea of the context of the work, of what it looks like day to day, if you're interacting with staff members as a volunteer and helping them out with different tasks, it certainly prepares you to sort of enter a profession with the IRC and hit the ground running. Because again, it's dynamic, it's constantly moving, and sometimes it is really beneficial to yourself and the staff if you already sort of have an idea of what you're starting. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Sarah. I mean, it's cool to hear very common themes across an incredibly wide range of opportunities. Eamon mentioned curiosity. You mentioned a diversity of interests and talents, and absolutely, we've heard that over and over, that most organizations are not looking only for international relations specialists, so we've disabused ourselves of this thought that there is a one particular course, there is a one particular academic degree that is going to launch you into an international career. It in fact starts more with you, what your passions are, what your interests are, and then that can be developed into an international career. Now, Eamon, I'd like to go over to you because a very interesting aspect of IRC, and which is not true for all international NGOs, is that these interesting American domestic opportunities and international opportunities. You spoke about your work here domestically. I wonder if you might say a word or two about IRC internationally, what they do, what opportunities are available, and I will just maybe ask you on a concrete terms, any thoughts of what your colleagues are doing now in response to the Turkey earthquake?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And so Sarah and I spoke about, again, mostly about what we do here in our office and in the United States. So in the U.S. Represents about 15% of our total staff worldwide. So much of our operations is again happening overseas in these 40 plus countries. Again, what the programming that they are doing in places like Poland and Moldova, in Syria, in Pakistan, in Kenya, in all over the world, range from there's a lot of health programming specifically focused on women and children that we do. There is a disaster response, which is the work that we're standing up and ramping up currently in Turkey and Syria. And that's very similar to the work that we did, again, in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where we're there just to support for basic needs, to provide food, shelter, clothing, all of those things that again, when disaster strikes, when a crisis first happens, there's a lot of that work that we do, and that's a big component. Again, so it's very immediate. And again, we mentioned we talked about curiosity. Another key thing is being adaptable. And so to work for the IRC overseas, you might have to be willing to mobilize and go from one location to another at a moment's notice. So that's something that we would, if I were hiring for somebody overseas, that we would be looking for. Are you able and willing to be able to, at a moment's notice, pick up and go to where where a response is needed? And again, in the last 18 months, we've responded to 3 major crises. Again, the first was the evacuation from Afghanistan. And in the United States, we played a big role in that, welcoming Afghans who literally got on airplanes and were evacuated. Then to, again, the Ukraine crisis, and that was responding again to this great displacement of more than I believe it's more than 8 million people have had to leave the Ukraine due to that crisis, and that's not. There were many other Ukrainians who were displaced internally too. So that amount, I think, is probably closer to 16 million total displaced people as a result of that conflict. I have not seen the numbers yet for Syria and Turkey, but I can only imagine the impact. You all maybe have seen some of the photographs, but it's literally devastation of buildings, of homes, and so that's just another driver of this great displacement that is going on in our world. And what the IRC does, again, is responds to those. But we're also working in countries where either historically there may be humanitarian crises, or we also look forward and we say we're in those places where we anticipate that there may be, whether it's related to political turmoil, climate change, all of these places. We're looking into all of those things and building programming and things to, again, to serve and support, again, all of these folks that are impacted by these humanitarian crises.
Eamon, I just want to highlight something that you said just now and then in your opening remarks, which is not only has your experience previously and now in IRC been kind of interesting and compelling and satisfying, you said yourself you're kind of in the middle of history in the making. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Soviet Union. You mentioned these 3 major crises over the past 18 months, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Turkey. If this kind of thing resonates with you, participants and people who are viewing, this is a great opportunity for you to actually not only be in the middle of unfolding events of global impact, but to be doing things that really matter. And that are compelling. So thanks for drawing that out, Eamon. And thank you also to you, Sarah, for helping us understand a little bit more about what you do, how you do it, and how you get there. And so I would encourage our participants and viewers, please check out the IRC on their website to find out the good work they're doing here in the United States, around the world, and think about them and many of their fellow NGOs who work all around the world as well. So let me also quickly thank, again, our very generous sponsors at the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, First Interstate Bank, Trail West Bank, QFI, High Stakes Foundation, and Longview Foundation. And thank Sarah and Eamon, and remind everybody who's watching that we have 2 more events coming up to wrap up International Careers Week. Following this at 11:30, we've got Mary Poole, good friends of all of ours, Eamon and Sarah's, working very closely with the IRC here in Missoula and Montana. Mary's talking about her organization, Soft Landing, but also this very important and interesting aspect that one can work in a nonprofit here based in Montana, but be engaged in global events. So that's going to be interesting. That's followed by Dean Stephanie Gray from Gallatin College on part 2 of opportunities in tech that are available here in Montana. So Sarah and Eamon, thanks again.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Chris.
All right. Thanks to you. Thanks everybody for watching. Be well. Bye-bye.